Roald Amundsen was born on July 16, 1872, in the town of Borge, Norway, into a family that would inadvertently shape his future as one of the most iconic explorers in history. He was the fourth of 5 children in the Amundsen family. His father, Jens Amundsen, was a prosperous shipowner and businessman, while his mother, Hannah, came from a family with a tradition of maritime interests. The Amundsen family had a strong connection to the sea, and this environment would have a profound impact on Roald's outlook on life. His early years were filled with the rhythms of seafaring life and a constant presence of adventure and risk. This created a natural foundation for his later passion for exploration. Amundsen's childhood was marked by a sense of longing for adventure that grew from a young age. He was particularly close to his mother, who inspired him with her tales of faraway places and exploration. However, his life took a significant turn when, at the age of 21, Roald's father died suddenly, leaving the family in a state of grief and financial uncertainty. His father's death profoundly affected him, and it sparked a desire to live a life that was anything but ordinary. He wanted to break free from the routine of a comfortable, predictable existence and sought meaning in exploration, a path that would define his life. From an early age, Amundsen showed a keen interest in the natural world. He was captivated by the stories of explorers and adventurers who had ventured into unknown territories. His fascination was particularly drawn to polar exploration, an area that would become his life's work. The idea of venturing into the uncharted, harsh environments of the polar regions appealed to him not only as a challenge of survival, but as a way to discover the unknown. At the time, the polar regions were seen as the final frontiers for exploration, representing the limits of human endurance and courage. This idea ignited Amundsen's ambition to one day venture into these remote territories. Before venturing into the unknown, Amundsen first pursued a more traditional education, attending the University of Oslo, then called the Royal Frederick University. There, he studied medicine, a subject he found useful for a life of exploration. He saw knowledge of medicine as vital to surviving in remote regions, where access to medical care would be limited or non-existent. However, his true calling lay outside the classroom. In 1893, Amundsen left university, deciding that his future lay not in the study of medicine, but in the pursuit of polar exploration. Amundsen's first step toward a life of exploration was his apprenticeship on a Norwegian vessel. He spent years sailing with various ships, learning practical skills that would prove indispensable in his later expeditions. During this period, he honed his knowledge of navigation, ship handling, and survival skills. Amundsen's ability to adapt to the hardships of life at sea set him apart from many of his contemporaries, providing a solid foundation for the grueling expeditions that awaited him. His resolve and discipline during these formative years would be integral to his success in some of the most dangerous and unforgiving environments on Earth. By the time he was in his early 20s, Amundsen had already set his sights on an ambitious goal: to find the Northwest Passage, the mythical sea route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic. The desire to chart unknown waters was one of Amundsen's most compelling motivations. In the 16th and 17th centuries, explorers had tried, and failed, to find the elusive passage, making it one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the time. Amundsen viewed this as the perfect opportunity to make a name for himself in the annals of exploration. His decision to pursue the Northwest Passage set the stage for what would become a lifelong quest to conquer the extremes of the Earth. In 1903, Amundsen began preparing for his first major expedition. He obtained a vessel, the GGOA, which would serve as his home and base of operations during the journey. Unlike many explorers who relied on larger, more cumbersome ships, Amundsen chose a smaller, more maneuverable vessel. This choice reflected his understanding of the harsh conditions of the Arctic, where the unpredictable ice flows would make larger ships less effective. With a crew of 6, Amundsen embarked on a journey that would take them through the icy waters of the Arctic. It was here, navigating the treacherous terrain of the Canadian Arctic archipelago, that Amundsen first displayed the leadership and strategic thinking that would later define his career. Throughout his early expeditions, Amundsen's meticulous planning and thorough understanding of the environment proved vital to his success. He paid close attention to every detail, from the design of his ship to the equipment used by his crew. His ability to anticipate the challenges posed by the Arctic landscape and his skill in managing his crew and resources allowed him to achieve what many thought impossible: completing the Northwest Passage. This success not only solidified his reputation as a capable explorer, but also gave him the confidence and resources to pursue even greater challenges, particularly the ultimate conquest of the South Pole. Amundsen's early life and formative years were shaped by both personal loss and a relentless drive for adventure. The passing of his father acted as a catalyst, pushing him toward a life of exploration, where he could carve out his own legacy. Roald Amundsen's journey into the world of exploration truly began when he decided to leave the comfort of his home and seek adventure on the seas. His early experiences aboard Norwegian ships were crucial in shaping his character as a voyager. They were not merely training grounds for his future expeditions, but immersive experiences that instilled in him a sense of purpose and a deep understanding of the natural world. As a young man, Amundsen was keenly aware that the skills needed to survive in the polar regions were different from those required for typical maritime navigation. He had to learn not just how to sail, but how to endure the unimaginable hardships of nature that would later define his career. Amundsen's first significant journey as an explorer took him to the polar seas. His early voyages were not large-scale expeditions with grand ambitions. Rather, they were a series of exploratory trips aboard various ships that allowed him to familiarize himself with the Arctic and Antarctic environments. In these initial years, he gained invaluable first-hand experience in the challenging conditions of the high latitudes. He navigated through stormy seas, freezing temperatures, and dangerous ice flows. It was during these early voyages that Amundsen learned what it truly meant to be an explorer: adaptability, patience, and an unwavering resilience in the face of nature's most extreme challenges. His first noteworthy adventure came in 1897 when he joined the Belgica expedition, a Belgian-led venture into the Antarctic. This expedition, which sought to explore the Antarctic continent, marked the first time Amundsen set foot in the polar regions. For the first time, he was exposed to the isolation and relentless cold that would later define his life. During the journey, Amundsen worked as a first mate aboard the ship and observed the scientific methods used by the expedition's leader, Adrien de Gerlache. Although the Belgica expedition faced numerous hardships, including being trapped in ice for a full year, it profoundly impacted Amundsen's understanding of polar exploration. The experience taught him vital lessons on endurance, teamwork, and the sheer unpredictability of polar environments. Upon returning to Europe after the Belgica expedition, Amundsen's fascination with the polar regions intensified. He began to realize that his passion for exploration could not be confined to mere curiosity. It was a calling. The lessons he had learned about surviving in harsh, remote places began to form the foundation of his broader ambitions. By this time, Amundsen had made a name for himself among the international community of explorers. He had earned respect not only for his skills, but also for his calm demeanor in the face of adversity. His time aboard the Belgica had proven his ability to cope with extreme isolation and the physical and mental strain of living in the polar environment. While many explorers of the time were still focused on charting the seas or exploring Africa and Asia, Amundsen set his sights on a more elusive goal, the Northwest Passage. This sea route through the Arctic had long been the object of many explorers' dreams. If Amundsen could be the one to complete this passage, he would not only cement his place in history, but also lay the groundwork for his future expeditions. The path to success in such a venture was fraught with peril, requiring an explorer to possess not just navigational skill, but also an intimate understanding of ice, weather patterns, and the unpredictable nature of the Arctic. Amundsen's decision to pursue the Northwest Passage was driven by more than just personal ambition. It was a challenge that demanded the full scope of his abilities. To prepare, he studied the accounts of earlier explorers, learning from their successes and failures. He meticulously planned every aspect of the journey, understanding that the slightest oversight could lead to disaster. At the same time, he began gathering a small crew of men who shared his passion for the polar regions. He chose them not only for their skills, but for their mental fortitude. Surviving in the polar environment required individuals who could endure extreme physical hardship and maintain a sense of camaraderie under stress. In 1903, Amundsen set off on his quest to navigate the Northwest Passage, an endeavor that would take him and his crew through some of the most unforgiving waters of the Arctic. The ship they used, the GJOA, was small and maneuverable, specifically designed for navigating through the thick ice of the Arctic Ocean. Unlike many explorers of the time who relied on larger, more unwieldy ships, Amundsen understood the importance of a vessel that could easily maneuver through shifting ice floes and tight passages. His ship was not merely a tool for transport. It was an extension of his own philosophy of exploration, adaptability, resourcefulness, and resilience. The journey was long and arduous. The GJO navigated through treacherous waters, often surrounded by thick ice and low visibility. Amundsen and his crew spent months battling the elements, at times trapped in ice for weeks on end. However, it was during this time that Amundsen's leadership truly shone. He maintained a calm, composed demeanor in the face of adversity, ensuring that his crew remained focused and motivated. His scientific training allowed him to take detailed observations of the environment, and he made use of the opportunity to study the indigenous peoples of the region, learning their techniques for surviving in the harsh Arctic climate. His respect for the local cultures and his ability to integrate their knowledge into his own strategies would become one of the hallmarks of his approach to exploration. Despite the numerous challenges they faced, Amundsen and his crew successfully navigated the Northwest Passage in 1906. It was a momentous achievement, one that established Amundsen as a serious polar explorer and earned him international recognition. The GJOA became the first vessel to complete the passage, and Amundsen's name was forever linked with the discovery of one of the most sought-after maritime routes in history. Yet, for Amundsen, this victory was just the beginning. The success of the Northwest Passage expedition gave him the confidence and resources to set his sights on an even greater challenge: the conquest of the South Pole. The completion of the Northwest Passage marked a critical turning point in Amundsen's career. It was not just a personal triumph. It represented the first step in his long-term ambition to become the world's foremost polar explorer. His experiences during this expedition cemented his belief that polar exploration was his true calling. The harsh environments of the Arctic, which many would find overwhelming, became the spaces where Amundsen truly thrived. The challenges of navigating through shifting ice and enduring extreme weather conditions were not deterrents to him, but opportunities to test his limits. The Northwest Passage had captivated the imaginations of explorers for centuries. This elusive sea route through the Arctic, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, was a dream that had driven many before Roald Amundsen. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it remained one of the greatest geographical mysteries in the world. Several explorers had tried and failed to navigate its icy waters, succumbing to the harshness of the environment, leaving the passage shrouded in legend. For Amundsen, however, it presented not only a challenge, but an opportunity to make his mark as an explorer. In 1903, after years of preparation, he embarked on a mission that would change the course of his career and the history of exploration. Amundsen's decision to pursue the Northwest Passage was a carefully considered one. He understood that the success of the expedition depended not only on skillful navigation, but also on an intimate understanding of the Arctic's challenging conditions. Unlike many explorers who attempted to force their way through the region with large, cumbersome vessels, Amundsen took a more thoughtful approach. His choice of the GJOA, a small and nimble ship, was a testament to his strategic thinking. The ship was well suited for maneuvering through the ice and navigating narrow channels, which was vital in the unpredictable waters of the Arctic. This marked the beginning of Amundsen's signature approach to polar exploration, a combination of meticulous planning and adaptive decision-making. Before setting out on the long journey, Amundsen took the time to study the terrain of the Northwest Passage and the failed expeditions that had come before him. He read the accounts of those who had tried to complete the passage, from John Franklin's disastrous attempt to the expeditions of Robert McClure and others. Each of these journeys had ended in failure, often due to unforeseen weather, bad luck, or poor decisions. Amundsen learned from their mistakes, knowing that it would be necessary not just to chart new paths, but to anticipate the forces of nature with an almost prophetic sense of caution. He was methodical in his preparation, ensuring that every aspect of the expedition, equipment, provisions, and crew, was carefully thought out and accounted for. Amundsen's crew, though small in number, was an essential component of his plan. He handpicked men who had both the physical endurance and the mental fortitude to withstand the harsh conditions of the Arctic. Each member of the team was chosen for their individual skills, from navigation to survival in the extreme cold. Their camaraderie and sense of unity were tested time and time again as they traversed the icy wilderness. Amundsen himself was a quiet, composed leader, never revealing the anxiety or uncertainty that might have been present. His ability to maintain a calm demeanor under pressure allowed his crew to trust him implicitly, knowing that their safety and success depended on his judgment. The expedition began in 1903, and soon the GJOA was sailing northward toward the Arctic. As they entered the waters of the Arctic archipelago, Amundsen and his crew were confronted with conditions that would challenge every ounce of their skill and perseverance. The ice floes were thick, the weather unpredictable, and the days long and exhausting. Yet, Amundsen maintained an unshakable optimism. He understood that success would not come quickly, but that gradual, deliberate progress would ultimately bring them closer to their goal. They were not in a race. This was a slow, measured process. One of the significant challenges the expedition faced was the constant shifting of the ice. Unlike more temperate regions, the Arctic Ocean was a dynamic environment where the ice could move unpredictably, trapping the ship or forcing it to change direction. Amundsen's solution was to adapt to the rhythm of the ice. Instead of forcing the ship through it, he would wait for the right conditions or take advantage of a break in the ice to move forward. This patience and adaptability proved to be one of his greatest strengths, and it paid off as the GJ made its way deeper into the Arctic. During the course of the journey, Amundsen and his crew encountered the indigenous peoples of the Arctic. They were the Inuit, a resilient people who had long thrived in the harsh conditions of the far north. Amundsen was not just an explorer, but a keen observer, always seeking to learn from those who had lived in the region for generations. He observed their techniques for hunting, building shelters, and navigating the landscape. This respect for indigenous knowledge became a hallmark of his approach to exploration. Amundsen understood that survival in the polar regions was not just about technology or tools, but also about the wisdom passed down through generations. Despite the challenging conditions, the expedition made steady progress. The GJO made its way through the labyrinthine waterways of the Arctic archipelago, passing through narrow passages and around towering icebergs. The crew faced constant hardships, but they also experienced moments of awe as they witnessed the untouched beauty of the Arctic wilderness. Amundsen's dedication to the expedition's success was unwavering, and the crew's morale was bolstered by his steady leadership. There were times when they were trapped by ice for months at a time, but Amundsen refused to succumb to despair. Instead, he made use of the time, conducting scientific experiments, mapping the region, and even learning more about the Inuit way of life. After nearly 3 years of arduous travel, the GJOA finally emerged from the ice and completed the Northwest Passage in 1906, making Amundsen the first explorer in history to successfully navigate this dangerous route. The achievement was nothing short of groundbreaking. It opened a new chapter in the history of exploration and established Amundsen as a preeminent figure in the world of polar expeditions. The completion of the Northwest Passage was an extraordinary feat, one that solidified his reputation and gave him the confidence to embark on even more ambitious endeavors. In the years that followed, the Northwest Passage expedition remained one of Amundsen's defining achievements. Yet, despite the recognition and accolades he received, he remained focused on the future. Amundsen's success in the Arctic was not the culmination of his career. Rather, it was a stepping stone that set the stage for his greatest adventure yet, the race to the South Pole. But in the aftermath of his triumph in the Arctic, Amundsen had already shown the world that his dedication, skill, and resilience in the face of adversity would take him to places few had ever imagined. The Northwest Passage was more than just a personal victory for Amundsen. It was a defining moment in the age of polar exploration. Through careful planning, unwavering determination, and a deep respect for the environment, Amundsen had achieved what many believed to be impossible. By the time Roald Amundsen had completed his successful navigation of the Northwest Passage, the world of polar exploration was on the cusp of a new race, this time toward the South Pole. The success of his Arctic expeditions had earned him widespread recognition, and the legend of his ability to survive and thrive in the world's harshest environments had grown. Yet, despite his achievements, Amundsen knew that his greatest challenge lay ahead. The South Pole, a vast, frozen desert that no human had yet reached, was calling to him. It was not merely the geographical challenge that attracted him. It was the opportunity to conquer the most elusive, untouched corner of the Earth, a place that had captured the imagination of explorers for centuries. Amundsen's interest in the South Pole was, in part, sparked by the growing news of British explorer Robert Falcon Scott's plans to reach the pole. By the early 1900s, Scott's expeditions had made headlines, and the race to the South Pole was becoming a public obsession. Amundsen, however, had a unique perspective. Rather than seeing Scott's mission as competition, he saw it as an invitation. The South Pole, he recognized, was an open challenge that required not only cutting-edge science and technology, but also an intimate understanding of survival in extreme cold and isolation. Having already proven his prowess in the Arctic, Amundsen decided that he would undertake a journey to the South Pole, determined to beat Scott to the prize. Before embarking on this historic journey, Amundsen spent months meticulously preparing for the South Pole expedition. He knew that the success of the mission would depend on more than just having the right equipment or the best team. It would require a deep understanding of the terrain, the weather, and the strategies necessary to survive in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Amundsen's research was exhaustive. He studied the accounts of earlier explorers, including Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic journey and the writings of the Belgian explorer Adrien de Gerlache. From these sources, Amundsen learned valuable lessons about what worked and what didn't in the frozen wilderness of the Antarctic. One of the most critical aspects of Amundsen's preparations was his decision to adopt a more innovative and effective approach to transportation. Unlike Scott, who planned to use ponies to carry supplies, Amundsen decided to rely on sled dogs, a strategy that would later prove pivotal. The sled dog teams he selected were not just ordinary dogs. They were carefully chosen for their endurance, strength, and ability to thrive in the extreme conditions of the Antarctic. Amundsen had learned the value of sled dogs during his time in the Arctic, where they had proven to be invaluable companions in the harshest environments. His experience with these animals gave him the confidence to trust in their abilities when facing the formidable challenges of the Antarctic. In addition to the sled dogs, Amundsen focused on creating a carefully structured and well-trained team. He knew that the success of the expedition would depend on the men who accompanied him, and he chose them with great care. Amundsen selected men who were not only experienced and capable, but also had the mental toughness to endure the long, grueling journey. They would need to work together as a cohesive unit, relying on each other's strengths and maintaining morale through the darkest and coldest days of the expedition. The team's preparation was rigorous, as they trained to handle the specialized equipment and learned the techniques necessary for survival in the extreme cold. The journey to the South Pole began in 1910, when Amundsen and his team set sail for Antarctica aboard the Fram, the same vessel that had carried him during his Northwest Passage expedition. As they approached the frozen continent, the sense of anticipation grew, not just for Amundsen and his men, but for the entire world. The race to the South Pole had officially begun. Amundsen's decision to keep his plans secret, however, allowed him to get a head start on Scott, who had announced his intentions publicly. This secrecy gave Amundsen the crucial advantage of time, enabling him to reach the Antarctic interior ahead of Scott's team. Upon arriving on the Antarctic coast, Amundsen and his crew established a base camp, which they named Framheim. The camp was strategically located to allow them to begin their journey to the pole. Amundsen knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous. The harsh conditions of Antarctica would test every ounce of his team's endurance. The winds, the cold, and the barren landscape will be constant adversaries. Yet Amundsen's confidence in his team and his carefully planned strategy allowed him to push forward, day by day, step by step, toward the pole. The journey southward was a relentless march into the heart of the Antarctic wilderness. Every day was a struggle to cover ground, as the party fought against fierce winds, freezing temperatures, and treacherous snowdrifts. They made use of their sled dogs to haul heavy loads, but the terrain was unforgiving. At times, they were forced to turn back when conditions became too dangerous, but Amundsen's leadership kept the team focused. He never allowed the men to lose hope, pushing them forward even when the polar horizon seemed impossibly distant. His calm demeanor, even in the face of adversity, inspired the crew to persevere. Every milestone was a triumph, and every setback was a test of their resolve. The closer they came to the pole, the more daunting the task became. The final stretch of the journey, which took place at an altitude of nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, was the most grueling. The thin air, the blinding snowstorms, and the constant cold made progress slow and exhausting. Yet, Amundsen's meticulous planning paid off. Unlike Scott, who had underestimated the challenges of the journey and the harsh conditions, Amundsen had taken every possible measure to ensure that his team could survive. His use of dogs for transport, his carefully calculated rations, and his team's physical and mental conditioning all proved to be crucial in overcoming the final leg of the journey. On December 14, 1911, after a month-long march, Roald Amundsen and his team finally reached the South Pole. The achievement was historic, marking the first time humans had set foot on the most remote point on Earth. Amundsen planted the Norwegian flag and left a message for Scott, who, unbeknownst to him, was still hundreds of miles behind. The triumph of reaching the South Pole was tempered by the awareness that the journey back would be just as perilous. But for Amundsen, the satisfaction of knowing that he had beaten Scott to the pole was immense. His careful planning, his respect for the environment, and his leadership had brought him and his team to the greatest prize in the history of exploration. Roald Amundsen's return from the South Pole in January 1912 marked the end of an extraordinary journey, but it also signified the beginning of a period of reflection and consequence. The world was still buzzing with the news of his achievement, yet it was a bittersweet moment for Amundsen. While his team had completed one of the greatest feats in human exploration, the triumph was tempered by the grim knowledge that his rival, Robert Falcon Scott, and his party were still struggling in the harsh Antarctic environment. Amundsen, having successfully returned to his base camp at Framheim, received word that Scott's team had failed to return and had perished during their own ill-fated attempt to reach the South Pole. The contrasting fates of Amundsen and Scott served as a painful reminder of the unforgiving nature of polar exploration. As Amundsen and his team returned to civilization, they were met with celebration and accolades, but there was no sense of personal glory in their victory. Amundsen, who had always been a man of few words, expressed his respect and admiration for Scott's determination. While the world lauded his own success, Amundsen remained somber, understanding that the cost of exploration was often measured in human lives. He knew, too, that his victory had come at the expense of another man's tragic failure. Upon returning to Norway, Amundsen was hailed as a national hero. His accomplishment of reaching the South Pole before Scott was not just a personal victory, but a source of immense national pride for Norway. Yet, in the wake of his success, Amundsen was left to wrestle with his emotions. The triumph at the South Pole was undeniably significant, but it did not satisfy his inner desire for exploration. It was not just the pole that had driven him. It was the spirit of discovery itself. Amundsen found himself seeking new horizons, eager to plan his next great adventure. But he was also confronted with the realization that he had reached the pinnacle of one of the most coveted challenges in exploration. What more could be done? The public attention surrounding Amundsen's South Pole achievement was immense, and the explorer became a figurehead in the world of exploration. He was invited to speak at events and receive awards from various governments, including the King of Norway. His fame soared, and with it came the recognition of his remarkable leadership, his unmatched survival skills, and his deep respect for the natural world. However, despite the accolades, Amundsen's thoughts remained preoccupied with what lay ahead. The South Pole was no longer the ultimate frontier. He had conquered it, and so his restless mind turned to new frontiers that still awaited exploration. While many in the world of exploration saw the South Pole as the final frontier, Amundsen was not content to rest on his laurels. He was, by nature, a man driven not by fame or fortune, but by an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and adventure. The next great challenge, as he saw it, lay in the world's frozen northern reaches, the Arctic. Though he had already achieved significant success in the Arctic through his Northwest Passage expedition, Amundsen began to set his sights on a new goal, becoming the first to successfully fly over the North Pole. The idea of an Arctic flight was an ambitious one, as aviation was still in its infancy. Nevertheless, Amundsen's desire to push the boundaries of exploration led him to seek new technological innovations. He began working with airship manufacturers and sought out new means of navigation. The flight over the North Pole would not just be a symbolic triumph for Amundsen. It would mark the next step in his evolution as an explorer who sought to break not only physical barriers, but technological ones as well. He understood that achieving such a feat would require collaboration with other scientists and engineers, and he embraced the idea of working with experts from different fields. As Amundsen began preparing for his polar flight, the world was captivated by the progress of aviation. The race to conquer the skies was intensifying, with aviators such as Charles Lindbergh and Roald Amundsen himself pushing the limits of human achievement. The journey into the skies, however, would not be without its setbacks. Amundsen's initial attempts to secure a safe and viable method for flying over the Arctic came with numerous challenges. He was forced to confront the technical difficulties of flying in such extreme conditions, and his determination to master the new technology tested his limits. It was during this time that Amundsen encountered another challenge, a personal one. His relationships with friends and family began to strain under the weight of his unrelenting drive for exploration. His intense focus on his expeditions left little room for personal connection. Amundsen's romantic relationships were fleeting, and his friendships with fellow explorers were often marked by a sense of distance. The loneliness that often accompanies such singular ambitions weighed heavily on Amundsen, who, despite his achievements, found himself feeling isolated in a way that was not immediately apparent to the public eye. Despite these personal struggles, Amundsen remained resolute. In 1926, he would make history once again, though not through a traditional journey on foot or by ship. Instead, he set out on a pioneering airship flight to the North Pole. While his North Pole flight was not the unqualified success he had hoped for, there was significant controversy about whether he had truly reached the pole. Amundsen's ambition was once again proven. He had once again shown the world that no frontier was too difficult or too remote for him to explore. As Amundsen's career progressed, he continued to challenge the boundaries of exploration. His restless spirit, which had driven him from the coldest regions of the earth to the sky itself, propelled him on further adventures. Yet, as his life moved toward its later years, Amundsen's adventures began to take on a more reflective quality. His name had become synonymous with daring exploration, and yet, in the quieter moments of his life, he began to question the true meaning of all his endeavors. Was it simply the thrill of the unknown, or was there something more profound that drove him? In the final years of Amundsen's life, he shifted his focus to the Arctic again. His legacy was not only that of the explorer who had conquered both poles, but also that of a man who had contributed to the scientific understanding of the polar regions. In the wake of Roald Amundsen's historic triumph at the South Pole, his unyielding desire for new challenges led him toward the world of aviation. Having proven himself as a master of polar exploration by land and sea, he now turned his sights to the sky. The Arctic, still largely unexplored by air, was the next frontier he sought to conquer. For Amundsen, this wasn't just about testing new technology. It was a means of pushing the boundaries of what humanity could achieve in the harshest environments on Earth. The idea of an Arctic flight would symbolize the ultimate adventure in his eyes, a way to continue his legacy of daring exploration, but this time in a completely new dimension. In the mid-1920s, the world was captivated by the rapid advancements in aviation. Airplanes and airships were becoming increasingly reliable, and flights that would have been inconceivable only a few years earlier were now within reach. Among the boldest ideas was the flight over the North Pole, an uncharted and perilous realm that had long been the subject of explorers' dreams. Amundsen, ever the visionary, was intrigued by the idea of an airship journey to the Arctic. An airship, with its ability to stay aloft for extended periods, seemed like the ideal vehicle for such a venture. It would allow him to chart a new course through the icy expanse, covering vast distances and testing the limits of human endurance. By this time, Amundsen was no stranger to the technical challenges of polar exploration. However, the Arctic's weather and atmospheric conditions posed a unique set of difficulties for aviation. Airships were susceptible to strong winds, extreme cold, and unpredictable weather patterns. Amundsen's deep understanding of polar environments, combined with his meticulous nature, made him the perfect candidate to lead such an expedition. Yet, despite his confidence, he was keenly aware of the risks. The concept of flying over the North Pole was still largely experimental, and the technology was far from perfected. The journey would require not just physical endurance, but immense technical precision. The opportunity for Amundsen to carry out his Arctic flight came through collaboration with the Italian explorer Umberto Nobile, who had already built his own airship, and one capable of navigating extreme conditions. Nobile, who had experience flying over the Arctic, became an essential part of Amundsen's plan. The two explorers, though differing in background and approach, shared a mutual respect for one another's capabilities. Amundsen's decision to join forces with Nobile reflected his willingness to embrace new ideas and technologies, as well as his recognition that polar exploration required a broad skill set, one that could only be achieved through collaboration with experts in different fields. The N-1, with Amundsen and Nobile at the helm, set out for the Arctic in 1926. Their journey, unlike his previous expeditions, would be one that tested the limits of not only human endurance, but also of aviation technology. The airship was an engineering marvel for its time, but it was still a delicate craft, vulnerable to the Arctic's violent winds and freezing temperatures. Despite the potential for danger, Amundsen remained resolute in his belief that the North Pole could be reached by air. The flight would begin from the coast of Spitsbergen, an island in the Arctic Ocean, where the conditions were less harsh but still unforgiving. The first leg of the journey was smooth enough. The N-1 glided through the Arctic skies, its large envelope catching the cold winds of the far north as Amundsen and Nobile moved closer to their goal. But as they ventured deeper into the Arctic, the weather began to shift, and the unpredictable forces of nature began to assert themselves. Low temperatures caused condensation in the airship's engines, leading to mechanical issues that threatened to derail the entire mission. Amundsen, ever the pragmatist, remained calm under pressure. His experience in the polar regions taught him that the best way to survive such a perilous journey was to remain adaptable and focused. As they neared the North Pole, the weather grew even more treacherous. A thick, swirling fog enveloped the N-1, and visibility dropped to nearly zero. The airship was drifting in an uncertain direction, carried by the fickle Arctic winds. Amundsen's experience with the unpredictable nature of the polar environment kept him grounded in the moment, but even he could not predict the hazards that lay ahead. The team relied on instruments and their sense of timing to navigate through the murky sky, but every passing moment brought with it the risk of disaster. At times, The crew members felt like they were floating in a world devoid of reference points, an endless, featureless expanse of white and gray. Despite these difficulties, Amundsen and his team pressed on. The determination to reach the North Pole, to complete what no man had yet accomplished, was a force that drove them through the harshest of conditions. Amundsen's calm demeanor in the face of such adversity was a source of strength for the crew. He had led his men through countless perilous expeditions before, and now he was leading them in the skies. His unwavering belief that they could conquer the North Pole inspired confidence, even as they battled extreme cold, mechanical malfunctions, and the constant threat of failure. At long last, after hours of navigating through the treacherous Arctic conditions, Amundsen and Nobile claimed to have reached the North Pole. On May 12, 1926, the N1 passed over what they believed was the northernmost point on Earth. Amundsen and Nobile planted their flags, marking their achievement. The flight had been a success in the sense that they had reached their destination, but it was marred by uncertainty. There was no clear way to measure their exact location, and the harsh conditions meant that they had not been able to fully confirm their position. Nevertheless, Amundsen's ambition had once again taken him to the furthest reaches of the Earth. The achievement was met with both celebration and skepticism. While many in the world of exploration hailed the success of the flight, others questioned whether Amundsen and Nobile had truly reached the pole. The lack of precise navigational tools and the challenging weather conditions left room for doubt. Some critics argued that the men had overshot or missed the North Pole entirely. Regardless of the controversy, Amundsen's airship journey was still seen as a groundbreaking achievement in the history of polar exploration. It marked another phase in his relentless pursuit of the unknown, a testament to his desire to push the boundaries of human endeavor. Roald Amundsen's relentless pursuit of exploration had defined his life, and even in his later years, he was driven by an insatiable thirst for adventure. However, as the 1920s drew to a close, Amundsen found himself contemplating the limitations of his own mortality. Age was no longer on his side, and the prospect of one final adventure loomed large in his mind. Having already conquered the South Pole, traversed the Arctic by air, and navigated the icy waters of the Northwest Passage, Amundsen set his sights on a new and dangerous challenge: the search for the missing airship Italia, which had crashed in the Arctic in 1928, stranding its crew and leaving them in a perilous situation. For Amundsen, this mission was more than just a final chapter in his career. It was an opportunity to show that even in the twilight of his life, he could still rise to the challenge. The Italia disaster had captivated the world. The airship, under the command of the Italian explorer Umberto Nobile, whom Amundsen had worked with during his earlier Arctic expeditions, had crashed while attempting to return from a North Pole expedition. Several of its crew members, including Nobile, were left stranded on the ice in the unforgiving wilderness of the Arctic. Amundsen, having learned of the tragedy, immediately decided to embark on a rescue mission. The expedition would be one of the most daring and dangerous of his career, and it would be undertaken in a time when his health was beginning to deteriorate, a factor that made the journey even more perilous. Despite his aging body, Amundsen was determined to undertake the mission with the same precision and determination that had driven him throughout his career. He assembled a crew, many of whom were veterans of earlier polar expeditions, and set out in 1928 on a journey to the Arctic with the goal of rescuing Nobile and his men. The plan was ambitious. Amundsen would fly over the Arctic in the airship Norge, which had been built for previous expeditions, and attempt to locate the stranded crew of the Italia. The perilous nature of the mission was compounded by the remoteness of the region, the unpredictability of the Arctic weather, and the dangers of flying in such extreme conditions. Amundsen's experience in the Arctic, combined with his extensive knowledge of the region's weather patterns, made him uniquely qualified for the mission. He knew, however, that success would require more than just technical skill. It would require patience, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to the task. Unlike previous expeditions, where Amundsen had been in control of his own fate, this mission was fraught with uncertainty. The Italia's wreckage was located in a vast, featureless expanse of ice, and locating the survivors would be like finding a needle in a haystack. The challenge was not only to reach the crash site, but also to navigate the shifting ice floes, the blinding snowstorms, and the extreme cold that could bring even the most experienced explorers to their knees. The expedition's progress was slow. Despite Amundsen's skillful navigation, the icy winds and unpredictable weather constantly delayed their efforts. On several occasions, the crew was forced to wait for days in the frozen wilderness, unable to make any progress toward their goal. Amundsen's leadership, however, remained steadfast. He had always been able to keep his men focused and motivated, and now, in the face of adversity, his calm demeanor and ability to make clear-headed decisions were more important than ever. In his own quiet way, Amundsen led by example, refusing to let the harsh conditions break his spirit or the morale of his men. As the days turned into weeks, the search for the Italia became an exercise in patience. The airship was forced to make several landing attempts in difficult terrain, and each time, the crew had to endure the cold and the isolation of the Arctic environment. But despite the setbacks, Amundsen refused to give up. His obsession with rescuing Nobile and his crew members became all-consuming. His previous successes had been marked by precision and foresight, but this mission felt different. The stakes were higher. It wasn't just about reaching a goal or achieving a personal victory. It was about saving lives. This mission felt like a final test of Amundsen's endurance and character. However, the Arctic weather would prove to be Amundsen's most formidable adversary. As weeks passed, the team's supplies began to dwindle, and the harsh environment continued to take its toll on their physical and emotional well-being. Despite his unmatched resilience, Amundsen's health began to deteriorate. He had aged significantly since his earlier expeditions, and the physical strain of the Arctic journey began to weigh heavily on him. But even as he grew weaker, his determination to complete the mission never wavered. He knew that failure was not an option, not just for him, but for the lives of those still stranded on the ice. Amundsen's final months were spent in relentless pursuit of the Italia survivors. But despite his tireless efforts, he was unable to locate them. By the time the search was called off in the fall of 1928, it was clear that Amundsen's health had suffered irreparable damage. His body had been ravaged by the extreme cold and the strenuous conditions, and the toll of the mission had taken its final toll on him. His last great adventure, though filled with noble intentions, had ended in tragedy, with Nobile and his crew members never fully rescued. The failure to locate the Italia survivors cast a shadow over Amundsen's final days. It was a stark reminder that even the greatest explorers were not immune to the forces of nature. Amundsen's legacy, though immense, was not without its blemishes. He had always prided himself on his ability to overcome the impossible, but this time, even his remarkable skill and determination had not been enough to defy the unforgiving Arctic. In his final moments, Amundsen must have reflected on the irony of his life. He had conquered both poles, made groundbreaking advancements in exploration, and navigated the most hostile environments on Earth, yet he had been unable to save the very men he had set out to rescue. In the wake of his death, Amundsen's legacy remained intact, even as the last chapter of his life was marked by a tragic, unfulfilled mission. The world remembered him not just for his achievements, but for his courage, his unyielding spirit, and his unwavering dedication to exploration. His last expedition, though incomplete, was a testament to the passion that had driven him throughout his life. The desire to push the boundaries of human possibility, to explore the uncharted, and to do so with a deep respect for the natural world. Roald Amundsen passed away in 1928, his life having been a series of groundbreaking achievements, each pushing humanity's understanding of the Earth's most extreme environments. Roald Amundsen's death in 1928, though shrouded in the unrelenting cold of the Arctic, marked the end of an era in the world of exploration. Yet, even in death, his legacy endured in ways that were felt far beyond the frozen expanses he had conquered. For a man whose life had been defined by a series of audacious feats, reaching the South Pole, navigating the Northwest Passage, and flying over the North Pole, his influence was as profound as the landscapes he had charted. Amundsen's impact was not just in the pages of history books or in the records he set, but in the way his spirit of adventure and determination inspired generations of explorers, scientists, and adventurers. In the years following his death, Amundsen's life became a symbol of the human pursuit of the unknown. His achievements were remembered with reverence by his countrymen in Norway, and his name became synonymous with resilience, precision, and an indomitable will. Yet beyond the accolades and recognition, Amundsen's legacy was also marked by the quieter, often overlooked aspects of his character. His meticulous planning, his respect for science, and his understanding of the environmental forces he encountered. These qualities, which set him apart from many of his contemporaries, helped to define not just his expeditions, but also his approach to life itself. Amundsen's approach to exploration was fundamentally scientific. He was not simply a man driven by the thirst for personal glory or recognition. He was deeply interested in the natural world, particularly in the polar regions, and he saw his journeys as opportunities to expand humanity's understanding of these desolate landscapes. His meticulous attention to detail, his focus on ensuring the safety and well-being of his crew, and his unwavering commitment to documenting his findings were all central to his approach. For Amundsen, exploration was about more than just personal achievement. It was about contributing to the collective knowledge of humankind. The scientific community, particularly in the field of polar research, regarded Amundsen's expeditions as groundbreaking. His expeditions were among the first to provide detailed data on the Arctic and Antarctic environments, their ecosystems, and their weather patterns. His understanding of the challenges posed by extreme cold, ice, and unpredictable weather helped inform subsequent expeditions. Amundsen's work in mapping the polar regions, both by land and by air, provided valuable insights that would shape the future of scientific exploration for decades to come. In addition to his scientific contributions, Amundsen's legacy also influenced the field of navigation. His voyages across the Arctic and Antarctic were some of the first to rely heavily on the use of modern navigational tools, including the use of sled dogs, the sextant, and radio equipment. These innovations helped to shape the way future explorers would navigate the most hostile regions on Earth. Amundsen's commitment to testing new technologies and refining old ones set him apart from many of his contemporaries and ensured that his expeditions were as much about advancing technology as they were about personal achievement. But Amundsen's legacy extended far beyond the polar regions. His life and career were a testament to the spirit of perseverance, the drive to overcome adversity, and the pursuit of something greater than oneself. He inspired not only future explorers, but also generations of people in other fields. His determination and courage became symbols of the broader human condition, the capacity to push beyond the boundaries of what is possible, to chart unknown territories, and to do so with a deep respect for the natural world. Amundsen's story became a metaphor for the indomitable human spirit, a reminder that no challenge was too great to overcome. In Norway, Amundsen was celebrated as a national hero. Statues were erected in his honor, and his name was remembered in the public consciousness as one of the greatest figures in Norwegian history. Schools and institutions were named after him, and his legacy became an integral part of the country's cultural identity. Yet despite the acclaim and adoration, Amundsen remained, in many ways, an enigma. He was not a man who sought fame for fame's sake. He was, at his core, a solitary figure, driven by a deep internal compulsion to explore the unknown. This inner drive, more than any external recognition, was what propelled him through the most difficult moments of his life. His private life, often overshadowed by his public persona, was also marked by his sense of isolation. Though he was admired by many, Amundsen's intense focus on exploration left little room for personal connections. He had few close relationships, and his romantic life was largely a series of fleeting encounters. This solitude, which was part of his nature, made him a complex figure. He was a man who found solace in the frozen expanse of the polar regions. Yet he often found himself distant from those closest to him. His family, while supportive of his endeavors, struggled to fully understand the depth of his obsession. In this way, Amundsen's life was a paradox, a man who sought to conquer the world's most remote and dangerous places, but who, in his quest for knowledge, remained emotionally distant from the world he had so thoroughly explored. One of the most poignant aspects of Amundsen's legacy is the enduring nature of his exploration spirit. Though he never sought the limelight, his name became a symbol of the possibilities of human achievement. His triumphs were not just about the physical feats he accomplished, but about the way he approached life, strategically, methodically, and with a reverence for the forces of nature. His expeditions were lessons in patience, discipline, and the importance of preparation. His ability to balance ambition with humility, to conquer the elements without arrogance, set him apart from many other adventurers of his time. Amundsen's contributions to the exploration of both the Arctic and Antarctic have left an indelible mark on the scientific community. His work with the Norwegian Polar Institute, his studies of glaciology, and his contributions to the understanding of polar ecosystems were groundbreaking. Even after his death, his influence continued to shape the way future expeditions were carried out. His meticulous record-keeping, his emphasis on careful preparation, and his ability to adapt to the ever-changing conditions of the polar regions became guiding principles for future explorers. The methods he developed for surviving in the harshest climates of Earth remain relevant to this day. As time passed, Amundsen's story began to transcend the boundaries of his field. His name became synonymous with the spirit of adventure, the search for the unknown, and the courage to face the most daunting challenges. His life, though tragically cut short, left a lasting impression on the world. The explorer who had conquered the poles, survived the most extreme conditions, and pushed the limits of human possibility was not simply a man of his time. He became, in many ways, timeless, a symbol of what humanity can achieve when driven by curiosity, determination, and an unyielding will to explore. Roald Amundsen's name remains synonymous with the spirit of adventure and the unyielding pursuit of the unknown. Yet, his true influence extends far beyond the accomplishments of his own lifetime. His contributions to modern exploration, both in terms of methodology and mindset, continue to resonate in the work of explorers, scientists, and adventurers today. His life was not just a chronicle of exploration. It was a blueprint for how to approach the unknown, how to push the boundaries of human capability, and how to do so with respect for the forces of nature. His legacy has not only shaped the course of exploration, but also provided the foundation upon which many of the world's most ambitious modern expeditions are built. Amundsen's approach to exploration was a masterclass in preparation, innovation, and resilience. His meticulous attention to detail in every aspect of his expeditions, from his choice of crew to the planning of logistics, set a standard for future explorers. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Amundsen did not rely on mere optimism or blind bravery. His expeditions were deeply grounded in scientific principles, and he was an early advocate for the importance of data collection and observation. Whether it was measuring the thickness of ice sheets or documenting the behavior of sled dogs, Amundsen understood that every detail mattered. This dedication to empirical research became a cornerstone of modern exploration, influencing everything from polar research to space exploration. One of Amundsen's most significant contributions to modern exploration was his use of sled dogs in the polar regions. While the use of sled dogs was not entirely new, Amundsen's skillful application of them was revolutionary. He recognized the crucial role that sled dogs played in navigating treacherous ice fields, where human strength alone could not suffice. His detailed understanding of how to care for, train, and utilize sled dogs allowed him to cover vast distances in the harshest environments on Earth. This knowledge has been passed down to modern explorers and continues to inform how teams operate in polar regions today. Amundsen's work with sled dogs has also influenced broader fields, including the study of animal endurance and how animals interact with extreme climates. In addition to his emphasis on animal transport, Amundsen was also one of the first explorers to fully embrace the potential of modern technology. From the use of radio communications in his later expeditions to his adaptation of aircraft for Arctic exploration, he demonstrated a forward-thinking approach that would become increasingly important in the 20th century. In fact, Amundsen's airship expeditions to the Arctic were among the first large-scale uses of aviation in polar exploration. His ability to integrate cutting-edge technologies with traditional methods of exploration marked a significant shift in how expeditions were conducted. Today, the use of satellite imagery, drones, and other advanced technologies in polar exploration owes much to the early groundwork laid by Amundsen and his contemporaries. Amundsen's legacy also extends to the training and development of future explorers. His commitment to thorough preparation and attention to the physical and mental well-being of his crew helped to establish standards for how expeditions should be organized and led. Unlike some of his contemporaries who led expeditions based on heroism and individual glory, Amundsen's leadership was characterized by a pragmatic, almost scientific approach. He understood that an expedition was a collective endeavor, and that the success of the mission depended on the well-being and efficiency of every member of the team. His approach to leadership has influenced generations of explorers who continue to place a premium on teamwork, respect, and cooperation in the face of adversity. Furthermore, Amundsen's approach to understanding and surviving in the extreme environments of the poles has had a lasting impact on modern survival training. Today, specialized training programs for polar explorers, mountaineers, and even astronauts are influenced by the principles Amundsen developed over the course of his career. His ability to adapt to and survive in the harshest conditions imaginable serves as the foundation for how modern explorers are prepared for similar challenges. Whether it's teaching individuals how to conserve energy in freezing temperatures, understanding how to use limited resources effectively, or recognizing the importance of psychological resilience, Amundsen's lessons continue to resonate. Another area where Amundsen's influence is felt is in the realm of scientific exploration. While many early explorers focused on the adventure and the glory of their discoveries, Amundsen always kept the scientific value of his expeditions at the forefront. He understood that exploration was not just about reaching new geographical points, but also about understanding the natural world. The data collected during his polar expeditions provided valuable insights into glaciology, meteorology, and animal behavior, and his scientific methodology has inspired subsequent generations of researchers. Modern scientific expeditions to Antarctica, the Arctic, and beyond still build on the scientific foundations that Amundsen established. His legacy has shaped not only the physical dimensions of exploration, but also the intellectual framework that drives current research in extreme environments. Amundsen's influence is also evident in the world of space exploration. Though he never dreamed of traveling to the stars, his spirit of pushing the boundaries of human capability in the face of unknown and hostile environments has informed the mindset of astronauts and space agencies around the world. In particular, NASA and other space agencies have looked to the techniques and strategies used in polar expeditions as models for surviving in the extreme conditions of space. The challenges of dealing with isolation, limited resources, and the mental strain of long-duration missions are all lessons that Amundsen's expeditions have provided to the modern space program. His life's work has shown that human endurance, combined with meticulous planning and respect for the environment, can overcome even the most formidable obstacles. Amundsen's impact can also be seen in the way modern explorers interact with indigenous cultures and local populations. During his expeditions, Amundsen developed a deep respect for the Inuit people of the Arctic, learning from them and integrating their knowledge of survival in the polar regions. This respect for local cultures and their expertise has been passed down to today's explorers, who recognize the importance of collaboration and understanding in their missions. Whether it's working with Arctic communities or collaborating with scientists from other countries, Amundsen's example has fostered a spirit of global cooperation in modern exploration. His belief that every culture has something valuable to contribute to the understanding of the world has become a key principle in the way modern explorers approach their work. In the world of adventure tourism, too, Amundsen's legacy continues to inspire. The polar regions, once the domain of only the most daring explorers, are now accessible to a new generation of adventurers. Companies offering expeditions to Antarctica or the Arctic often draw on Amundsen's techniques, taking travelers on journeys that echo the challenges of early polar exploration. These expeditions, while not as perilous as those faced by Amundsen, are a testament to his lasting influence on the spirit of adventure. They allow people to experience the same landscapes that he explored, to understand the beauty and the dangers of the poles, and to reflect on the spirit of discovery that defined Amundsen's life. Roald Amundsen's life, punctuated by remarkable triumphs, remains one of the most fascinating narratives in the annals of human exploration. As decades have passed since his death, the stories of his deeds have transformed into a legend that stretches far beyond the realms of polar exploration. His name has become synonymous with the idea of human perseverance against all odds, and his myth continues to grow in stature. The essence of Amundsen's character, his bravery, determination, and unrelenting drive, has elevated him to an almost mythical status in the world of exploration. But what is it about his legacy that has allowed it to persist and inspire long after his passing? What makes him stand as the ideal figure of the explorer who triumphed over the impossible? At the core of Amundsen's myth is the sheer audacity of his ambitions. Few individuals in history have sought to conquer the Earth's most inhospitable regions with such single-minded determination. While many of his contemporaries sought to claim geographic landmarks in their names, Amundsen's objectives were more profound. He did not just wish to reach the South Pole. He wanted to understand it. He did not simply wish to cross the Arctic or conquer the Northwest Passage. He sought to do so with purpose and precision, leaving behind not just his footprints in the snow, but detailed scientific records for future generations. His was a mission not of conquest, but of discovery, and this aspect of his character is what continues to resonate in the modern world. Amundsen's achievements were, in many ways, a contradiction. On one hand, he was a man who mastered the art of survival in the most brutal conditions known to humanity. His expeditions to the Arctic and Antarctic demonstrated a strength and resilience that seemed to defy the odds. On the other hand, he was a man who never sought personal glory or recognition. His refusal to embrace the public eye in the same way as other explorers of his time, such as the flamboyant Ernest Shackleton or the heroic Robert Falcon Scott, contributed to his enigmatic nature. It was as if Amundsen cared less about the fame that accompanied his feats than the satisfaction of achieving his goals with skill and precision. This humility, even in the face of tremendous achievement, has only added to his mythic stature. The contrast between Amundsen's public and private lives is another element that has contributed to the enduring fascination with his story. Despite his public acclaim as one of history's greatest explorers, Amundsen lived a life of profound solitude. His obsession with exploration, his total commitment to his expeditions, left him with little time for the traditional markers of success or fulfillment. His relationships were often strained, and he never married or had children. In a way, Amundsen was a man who devoted himself entirely to the pursuit of knowledge, a sacrifice that led to both great triumphs and profound personal loneliness. This balance between achievement and personal sacrifice gives Amundsen's story a tragic undertone. He was a man who gave everything for his work, but often found that in doing so, he lost much of what others might consider a full life. One of the most striking features of Amundsen's legacy is the way his story has been passed down through generations of explorers, scientists, and adventurers. Amundsen's expeditions were transformative not only because they expanded the map of the world, but because they set a new standard for how such explorations should be conducted. His methods, grounded in careful planning, scientific inquiry, and respect for the environment, have been adopted by modern explorers in a variety of fields. In this way, Amundsen's myth is not simply a reflection of his past deeds, but a living force that continues to shape the way humanity approaches the unknown. The explorers of today, whether they're navigating the icy realms of the poles, climbing the highest mountains, or venturing into space, often look to Amundsen as a touchstone for how to approach their own challenges. His influence on modern exploration is not confined to those who follow in his footsteps in the harshest of environments. The spirit of Amundsen, the quest to push human limits, to uncover hidden knowledge, and to honor the natural world, is embedded in the broader culture of adventure. Amundsen's story has inspired a host of adventurers, filmmakers, authors, and artists. The visual representations of his journey, the iconic images of his men trekking across the frozen wastes of Antarctica, or the towering images of the Fram, his polar ship, have become part of the collective consciousness. His myth has been woven into the fabric of our understanding of what it means to be an explorer, and it continues to inspire not just polar expeditions, but all manner of human adventure. In literature and film, Amundsen has become a symbol of the solitary hero, the individual who rises above personal hardship to accomplish the seemingly impossible. His life has been chronicled in numerous books, documentaries, and films, often depicting him as a man driven by an inner fire, willing to risk everything for the pursuit of knowledge. These portrayals often focus on his stoic leadership, his precision, and his ability to maintain focus under the most extreme conditions. In these narratives, Amundsen is more than just a historical figure. He is a symbol of human perseverance, a reminder that no goal is beyond reach if one is willing to pay the price. Yet, as with any myth, there are complexities and contradictions that undercut the idealized image of Amundsen. For all his extraordinary accomplishments, he was not infallible. His final expedition, the ill-fated search for the Italia, revealed the limitations of even the greatest explorers. Though his intentions were noble, the mission ultimately ended in failure and tragedy, underscoring the harsh realities of exploration. This failure, however, does not diminish his legacy. If anything, it humanizes him, reminding us that even those who have conquered the greatest challenges are not immune to the forces of nature. Amundsen's legacy, in this sense, is more profound because it acknowledges that failure is an inherent part of human endeavor, and that courage is not only about succeeding, but also about continuing despite adversity. The legend of Roald Amundsen continues to evolve, not as a fixed image of man from the past, but as a living story that speaks to the ongoing human quest for discovery. In modern times, the polar regions that once seemed so remote and inaccessible are now a destination for scientists, tourists, and adventurers. Yet even in this era of rapid technological advancement, the spirit of Amundsen's exploration, his belief in the importance of preparation, his respect for the environment, and his capacity for enduring hardship remains as relevant as ever. His myth persists because it taps into the core of what it means to be human, the desire to push beyond the known, to confront the unknown, and to grow in the process. Ultimately, Roald Amundsen's myth is not only about the man himself, but about the very nature of exploration. It is about the quest to challenge the impossible and to venture into the unknown, no matter the cost. It is about embracing the risks, enduring the struggles, and ultimately transcending the limitations of our own perceptions of what is possible. The story of Amundsen is a reminder that exploration is not just about geography. It is about human growth, discovery, and the pursuit of something greater than oneself. His legacy endures not just as a historical account of the triumphs of a great explorer, but as an ongoing inspiration for future generations to continue their own journeys into the unknown, wherever they may lead.